Shalom, this video is Ask the Erabbi, Volume 7. Got a lot of great questions this week. Some are very simple and some are more complex. In fact, the two most complex ones, or two of them, I did separate videos on. One reader wanted to know whether the Bible should be best understood as literally true, mythological, legendary. I did a video on that. Is the Bible true? Is it legend, myth? And then somebody wanted to know, do conservative rabbis agree that the Exodus may not have occurred as the Bible says? I did a video on that are both uploaded on this site. Other questions. Why aren't there Jewish flowers at Jewish funerals? Well, the basic question is, first of all, we believe in simplicity and equality. You should watch my video on Jewish funerals, so we don't want to spend extra money that's not necessary, and especially to kill something else to honor somebody who just died. Doesn't make any sense to us. Rather give the money to something that'll help the living, like tzedakah, charity. Number two, how come you don't see instruments at many Jewish services? Well, at our services you do. We use piano, guitar, violin, all kinds of instruments, organ. The conservative rabbinate allows it, even though many conservative synagogues don't use it. Originally, in the old temple days, in ancient days, going back more than 2,000 years, they did use it on the Sabbath, but then the Christians started using it, so that's one reason Jews stopped, but that seems like not a very smart reason today. And then there's a concern, for example, if you're playing guitar and a string breaks, you might have to fix it, so we simply don't fix it on Shabbat, which is not permitted. But we do use music in our services, but a lot of synagogues don't, because they believe the tradition that once the temple was destroyed, you shouldn't do anything basically that was done in the temple, and also because of the problem that it might break. Then every week I get questions about this verse or that verse in the Bible, and doesn't it prove Jesus? Well, I have many videos on that, why those verses are not provable of that Jesus is anything significant. You can watch Jews Not for Jesus 1, 2, and 3, Jews and Jesus. I have lots and lots of videos about that. But basically, first of all, the Bible never says Jesus. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, if it wanted to say Jesus, it would have said Jesus. It doesn't, so why would you think it's Jesus? There's plenty other possibilities that lived much earlier and are much more possible. Second of all, they're translating from like 5 languages, usually from Hebrew to Greek to Latin to English. I mean, every time you translate something, you lose its meaning, so they're all full of mistakes. Now, the specific one this week was Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, where they say they think it says that this messianic character is going to vanish and come back. It doesn't say anything of the kind. You read the original Hebrew is uncertain. It certainly doesn't say that. And there are much more possible people that it's referring to, other than some guy, a young rabbi who lived a couple of hundred years, many hundred years later. It doesn't say anything about that. Then they wanted to know whether conservative rabbis accept Reform conversions. We have a standard of rabbinic practice where we are required to, for conversion, obviously teach the people and have a beit din, and then the rituals for males must be circumcised ritually, and females and males must be immersed in a mikveh. So most conservative rabbis, if the Reform rabbi officiating has a beit din and they immerse in the mikveh and they have ritual circumcision, will accept the conversions. I don't know of any that won't. There may be some, but basically it's accepted conversions. Then somebody wanted to know that they have Jewish parents, but they were not circumcised as a child. They became circumcised as an adult. Does that fulfill the mitzvah? Absolutely. Yeah, of course, if it was done in a ritual way, that means that a moil should have been present, or a rabbi or somebody to say the required blessings. It absolutely fulfills the mitzvah. Now, the questions of do we read the Bible as myth, history, literature, really see my 6-minute video on that. I can't give a 6-minute explanation now, but we do not take it literally. The fundamentalists do, the fanatics do, but most Bible scholarship does not take the Bible literally true. We don't read it as a science book. It was never meant as a science book. It's not word for word from God to Moses. It was oral for many hundreds of years, as many of my videos explain, and it was written down and redacted, a composition of many documents. We believe God was behind it and inspired it, but there's much mythological there. Now, mythological doesn't mean untrue. For example, the Noah story, everybody has a flood story. The question for us is, what does our flood story teach? And everybody's got a creation story. I took a whole course in college called Creation Myths. The question is, what does our creation story teach? And then they want to know if the Exodus is true, and they quote a prominent conservative rabbi, David Wolpe, saying the consensus in scholarship is it didn't happen the way the Bible happens. Well, clearly we believe didn't happen the way the Bible happens. A lot of different theories as to what happened. Watch my video, 6-minute video on is the Exodus true, and that doesn't change anything. Purim, we know, is a historical novel, not based in actual details about the 4th century of Jewish life in Persia, but it's still a meaningful holiday and teaches very important lessons. The question was, will everyone be Jewish at the end of time? And for that, there is in the Mishnah Torah by Maimonides, certainly a rabbi's credentials and no one can challenge, the greatest rabbi of history, when a portion of the Mishnah Torah that was actually cut out by the Christian censors through much of history says is the following. When you understand Zechariah, the prophet in the Bible, it says in the end of days, Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad U'Shmo Echad, that all people will go to Jerusalem and all will acknowledge Adonai as the one God. So that the basic ideas of Judaism, of the Torah and the Sabbath and the commandments and the Messiah were passed down to the many peoples of the world through Christianity and Islam. Our belief is that they obviously went a different direction, changed a lot of things, have different ideas, but in the end of time, the truth will be restored and people will recognize that the origin, the original ideas of this come from Judaism, and you don't need all these intercessors and other characters, and that, as we say, Moses got the original thing and there's nothing that supersedes it. However, in this lifetime now, we don't care if other people are not Jewish, doesn't matter. If you live a good life and follow the basic rules of decency, that's what's needed. But there is a basic belief by Maimonides that in the end, everyone will come to Jerusalem and recognize that Adonai is the one God. Then the question was, again, I have videos about this, about God and evil. How come, if there's a personal God, that people suffer? And that's happened continually. There's a lot of ways to answer this. The theology of the book of Judges basically is Israel was punished by God because it sinned. The book of Job is the opposite, where Job suffered, he didn't sin, and God says, this didn't happen to you because you sinned. There's the concept of God hiding God's face. I highly recommend on this the book Basic Judaism by Rabbi Milton Steinberg, his section on evil, all the different theories about evil, or Harold Kushner has one view in his book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. You think about Isaiah's verse that says, I saw injustice and wondered why there was no one to intervene. God doesn't decide who dies when. We need God. See my video on Why God to kind of help explain that, but we don't blame God for individual suffering in the world. Then somebody wanted to know about whether there's transliterated prayers. Yes, you can go on the internet, and there's lots of different prayer books that have transliteration. There are some prayer books actually that are printed that have good transliteration. For example, we use Media Judaica prayer book press series, Likrat Shabbat on Friday night in our congregation, and Sidur Chadash on Saturday morning, and both have good transliteration. And finally, somebody wanted to know why the commandments of Judaism don't prohibit things that today we consider very important, like rape and slavery and genocide and protecting children. And Jewish law absolutely does. Sex out of marriage is, we could do a whole series of videos on all of these questions. The slavery of the Torah is not the kind of slavery you see in past history where people are taken away from their families, and the kind of slavery that's in the Torah is really financial servitude, where somebody will work for somebody to pay off a debt, or voluntary. There were times, of course, where people were captured in war, and they had to be treated decently with proper behavior and were given an opportunity to leave after a while. There's many laws about protecting children and not harming people. And of course, we're talking about documents that are 4,000 years old, and as Jewish tradition developed and as the rabbis developed the tradition, more and more of what's viewed as the basis of contemporary society are found in early rabbinic literature. So those are my very brief answers on very complex questions, by and large, for Ask the Rabbi 7. If I get requests to expand on some of these in separate videos, I certainly could. Shalom.